Rosie Leopold, authenticity and intimacy coach, a writer, a speaker, and a multi-dimensional woman devoted to men who claim their confidence, expression, connection. Within psychology, current doctoral studies in holistic and lived experience that spans theatre arts, sex work, and personal healing from chronic illness, Rose bridges the practical and the poetic through her coaching, her Substack, and a wonderfully authentic website, Naturally Rosie, towards emotional intelligence, self-trust, and embodied aliveness. I would urge you all, after you listen to this, to rush straight off to naturallyrosie.me, naturallyrosie.me, to find so much more about Rosie and the work that she does. We've already talked 15 minutes before I even thought about hitting record. So thank you so much for what you shared already. I'm sure some will weave into where we are. Obviously, welcome so much for joining me. And I don't want to start talking about low points, but there were some words that you've used before, and I found your teenage years. You talked about teenage years being a hellfire in your journey. Can you give a little bit about your life as you went through your teenage years, your early 20s? I promise we'll move on to more positive things, but just to get a feeling for who you were at that time.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, first, thank you for having me on, Andrew. This has been the interview I've been most excited about over the months since I got onto Podmatch, the platform that we met on, and just feeling so much resonance just with our written communication so far. And yeah, I agree that it's valuable to start with some context for my life and how I got here, especially because it will offer resonance to a broader audience, especially those who are maybe in lower points themselves or who have been in lower points. Yeah, so very suddenly, soon after I turned 15, I started experiencing what quickly turned into debilitating emotional, mental, physical, we can maybe say spiritual illness. So what did that look like? At first it was anxiety that quickly turned into panic attacks. I would have 3 to 5 very extreme panic attacks a week, starting that fall. My birthday's in September. So like as early as that fall, I would be sitting in class and these panic attacks would come on. Totally new experience for me. Like I was a very healthy, happy, relatively centered child. I mean, not that my life was perfect, but I had not been an ill child. And so very suddenly I was experiencing this debilitating anxiety that spiraled into depression very quickly, especially because of the powerlessness that it brought up. And this was accompanied by weird GI distress and illness that was new. Suddenly I was clenching my jaw. I found myself using a mouth guard at 15 because I was suddenly experiencing very bad jaw pain and then migraines, multiple migraines a week that would have me, running for darkness and silence to avoid that overstimulation. And that was, and it spiraled from there. So into suicidality, multiple suicide attempts, 4 over the years, diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder, and had multiple doctors bring up PTSD, but it was never officially diagnosed because there didn't seem to be any particular trauma. It was just the best we could figure was the trauma was the illness. There had been no, seemingly anyway, there had been no catalyst for all of this disease that that really overwhelmed my life for the next 8 years. So until basically 15 to 23 was my life revolved around being sick. I've always I've always been an intelligent person, and found myself in college working through school slower than I ever had in my life. Like, it took me so much longer just to get through school than I imagined it would. I could barely hold down a job. It was very difficult to be by myself for a lot of those years. There was a lot of codependency, and I had no radar for how to choose and maintain healthy relationships. That was out the window. um, yeah, and slowly, inch by inch, breadcrumb by breadcrumb, I followed a trail out of that hellhole, out of that pit. Um, Namely through choosing to say yes to myself and yes to my instincts, instead of continuing to say yes to ideas and experiences and solutions that other people were offering me that continued to prove subpar. They weren't working, right? I was on over 4 dozen medications during those 8 years, in and out of doctors' offices and hospitals, and at some point, I found myself through, and really the first step of this was through the 12-step program I was telling you about. I found myself around a new caliber of people, and for the first time in my life, felt like it was welcome for me to be radically vulnerable and to be messy and to be honest about that messiness, and that actually people were willing to show up and love me through that and in that, which was just very permission giving and healing in and of itself, and did really help me to connect to deeper layers of me that then, as I leaned into more, those deeper layers were like, hey, let's try this mindfulness practice thing, and oh, that seems like it's kind of working. Let's try the meditation thing, and oh, those people seem to like this yoga thing. Let's try that, and then as I was leaving the 12-step program, I decided to try intentional ceremonial use of psychedelics to help just heal just even the trauma to my neurology, right, from all of those years, and just continued to say yes to those more out of the box, alternative, we could say, ideas, like you're the creator of your reality, right, which at first was felt very threatening, and how dare you say that, and why would I create this reality? And continuing to be willing to break down and surrender to such things, to such ideas, and to grow through them, offered me a path to where I am now, which is radically different than that hellhole.
It's inspiring and terrifying all at the same time, really, I think. So did you ever come to a conclusion about, I guess, ask the question is really, so what it was that you had, and then secondly, you created that reality for yourself to allow you to be in the place that you are today?
It does. So, to speak to your first question, ultimately, I don't know. I have ideas as to what could have triggered that experience if there was some kind of physical trigger. And I've found a lot of peace in just kind of surrendering to, ultimately it doesn't really matter. The part of me that was so hooked on looking for that why was looking for something to blame, as I found it, something to hold accountable outside of myself. And then the idea, Did I create that so as to end up here? And I spend time with a lot of people who say things like, before I came into this life, I had this plan, and I decided that these things would happen so that I would wake up and realize more of myself. And again, I'm like, maybe that's true. I I
Mm.
For me, that's not as important as more of the what is of the matter, which is that until we choose to peel back the layers of resistance, however they appear for each of us, we will continue to feel that pressure of not being our authentic selves, being in our empowered light. So whether that was something that I chose and planned before I came here, or whether it was simply the fact of the matter that as a child I was not very in touch with my emotions. I was not, well, I was actually very sensitive, but it was not a conscious thing. That was not something I was taught to be consciously aware of in the environment that I grew up in. So the what so of that was that they were going to kick my ass until I started listening to them. Um, they were going to be heard, and those parts of ourselves are just clamoring to be heard, essentially, not to cause turmoil, but because
Mm.
they have
Mm.
wonderful insight for us.
Mm. It's scary to think of the places you ventured into at times with the suicide attempts, and thank goodness they weren't successful. But I've been reading a lot lately about, and you might probably disagree with this, absolutely fine, with inherited trauma, and how we sort of
Mm.
how we can carry trauma from many generations past. And it feels hearing you say that almost sort of weighted, and then it's like, right, there's this person here that has a being and a spirit here that we now can handle the volume of trauma. And so but then it also feels you've created a sort of split, the trauma of the past and then the positivity of the future, that you've almost drawn a line in the sand as such. So first of all, what are your thoughts on inherited trauma? And if you say no thoughts, then it might be a very short station. But and then secondly, did that ever come to mind? If you do support that notion that obviously, like, from a place that you were very aware of, but it came from somewhere, so something your body's drawing it in almost from somewhere, and then you find push it away almost.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, great questions. So yes, I do see, I do recognize, yeah, intergenerational trauma or inherited trauma, in a few senses. That manifests, we could say, in, at different levels, whether that's um, in a very physical way, like through our genetics, and we can change our genetic expression. That's something we can dive into if you want. Or whether, so whether it's like at a very physical level through genetics and physical disease, an emotional level, like, parents not knowing how to be present with their own anger, worry,
Mm.
doubt, etc. So those things, there's a reactivity around those emotions that's then passed on to the children, whether they're reacting in the same way, modeling, or reacting in the opposite way. Um, there's that reactivity there. And then there's kind of just a more general or vague, energetic, we could say, um, in way of passing intergenerational trauma um, that spreads out even to the collective, right? That's not just
Mm.
through biology, but is something that we all are carrying, and carrying until we, as individuals, transmute what we can, and then continue to, through that process, very organically, we want to help others continue to transmute that same collective trauma. So whether that, so things like learning to take responsibility for one's experience, letting go of self-victimization, letting go of a martyrdom mindset, etc. Those are things that are, well, that, are very collective in their nature, while of course each kind of, subgroups and individuals have their own more specific ways of showing those patterns. So yes, to answer your question, I do recognize intergenerational trauma, and yes, it's something that I've been very present to through most of this process. I mean, not all. It became much more obvious as after I had that very pivotal LSD experience that I was telling you about before we got on, and as I was really coming to this whole new level of self-realization and awareness, in conjunction with help from psychedelics, support from just another new caliber of people, community in my life, and letting go of the psychiatric medications I was on. So I'm coming into this new sense of awareness and realizing, the realization will often happen sometimes very ahead of the actual physical grounding of the experience. So even though I was still, recovering from illness in many ways and very far from where I am now, so this is 7 years ago, I had the awareness of how deeply true it was that and I'll shift this a bit. People say I am the creator of my reality. I really like how Dr. Joe Dispenza says it, which is, you are creating your personal reality. And I might break that down more by saying that we are the creators of our perception of reality. And through that, we actually get a lot of control over what we then create next in our personal reality. And as I'm going through this process, Andrew, some of the first people that I'm so excited to share these things with are my family, are my parents, are my younger brother, and immediately ran into the resistance of basically the old me, right? They hadn't gone through those very pivotal wake up experiences. I had, they had not. So suddenly I was, confronting to some degree. I didn't really have the tools to truly confront with presence or to meet them with presence at the time. I was just more running headstrong into trying to share these things with them. And meeting the resistance of my past, of the way that those family traumas, those collective traumas have manifested in my family. And it took me a couple of years to really be able to create spaciousness around that, just to recognize that that I wasn't going to heal my family or heal the intergenerational trauma through other people, right? That was work I had to do in and with myself.
So much there, and I think one of the things you said, and we'll come into it later on, is that we often have an idea or desire that we've been thinking about or we've been developing, and the ideas have been nurtured and whatever, and then we then spring this idea or vision or thought on our partners, our loved ones. And sometimes we sort of forget that, oh gosh, but I'm 18 months into that journey for the first time. No wonder they're like, what? And that's how, no matter what it is, whether it's something to do with it, whether it's something to do with we've always gone to the same place on the holiday, or we always go to the in-laws for Thanksgiving. It's like, oh my gosh, I've been thinking about this and preparing it for so long, but you're just, so it's super hard. And I think with so many people, so many of us have a tendency to almost cling to what we know is true, even though we're clinging to something that we perceive to be true and we haven't explored. So I think that's the challenge, that rather than let ourselves think, maybe there's something more to life or living or what I've been taught, learned, what I've seen. Maybe there's something different. Maybe I let go enough to receive different wisdom. Sometimes it's easier to cling to the known. And I think that's where many people are stuck. That I was talking to you before, but I really want to let go of the known. Yeah, let go of the life raft and just see where I float to. I just might go somewhere different. But I think I have that tendency to, well, I'll just stick to what I know. And yeah, I've got family members that haven't sort of 40 miles from where they are in their life, and other people that I know, I've been fortunate enough to travel the world, and it's how we cling to this certainty of who we are without really ever actually exploring it, which I think is fascinating. So I'm not really sure it's a question now. Just a minute. But the question I did want to ask is, and this is probably the answer. So from that lived experience, from the trauma and the introspection and the external version of you, how describe what you do today, and even harder?
Yeah, when you say what I do today, are you referring to something specific, like the work I do with clients, or is it a more general question?
Yeah, I guess in terms of career. So if people reached out to your website and thought, what Rose actually does, how would you define what you do?
Yeah, I create. Okay, yeah. So I give people my presence. I give people my full presence as much as I can. That's still and always will be a practice for me, especially because my presence will continue to increase. Yeah, I give people my presence, and through that, I help them create spaciousness around the parts of themselves that have become contracted, meaning that they've pushed these parts away. There's darkness around these parts. So with my presence, I help other people create spaciousness around their contractions, and so that those contractions will, and they naturally do this when we give contractions spaciousness and loving presence, so that they open up and reveal their contents, and then I we might say guide. We might just say that I kind of hold people's hands, sometimes literally, sometimes just metaphysically, metaphorically, as they get a clear view on that contraction and on its opening up process. And when we as humans can witness ourselves in that way, that allows us to experience a new kind of paradigm. It gives us, it naturally offers us insight into realizing a deeper truth of who we are, because suddenly, whatever that contraction was manifesting as, in the sense of um, a, a draining or negative, per se, emotional energy, a limiting belief system or construct, a self identity that was maybe detrimental, maybe just not as great as the person has the potential for. However, that contraction was manifesting, suddenly the person is able to witness it and be with it in a way that their consciousness is able to recognize that as a story. That as a story, as an illusion per se, as a paradigm that they were unconsciously choosing, and in that, and because of that unconscious choosing, perpetuating. And then once that new level of awareness has been had, um, that will create an even greater spaciousness for the person to then create, okay, so if not that, then what? And there's this whole new sense of freedom of, wow, now that I've let go of that thing, now I can have whatever I want, and that whatever I want is much less limited than it was when the contraction was there. So a lot of what I do is just creating the space and the container for that process to happen. It's very important to me. It's one of the fundamental tenets of my practice that what I'm doing is facilitating, is not even in the traditional sense of coaching, like telling people, like giving advice, telling people what is best for them. There is some level of, I often will. I do my best to ask, may I offer you a suggestion? May I share with you what I'm seeing right now? While always emphasizing, this is your this is your practice, this is your process. You know you will know you better than anyone else will ever have the opportunity to. Like, and that's one of the glorious things about this process, is that we get so deeply in touch with who we are as individuals. I've been saying for years, I mean, and this is just so freeing and also holds me to my own fire. Like, I'm the only one that's going to have to go to sleep with myself every night for the rest of my life. Like, no one else will ever even have the opportunity to come close to knowing me and understanding me the way I do. And so who else is going to do that? Yeah, and so because I've had amazing people, places, circumstances, tools in my life that have taught me how to do that for myself, I am able to create space for and facilitate other humans through that process, as they walk that path for themselves in the way that is unique for their being.
I love the fact you use the word presence. I think that's one of the real anomalies in the 21st century, is that we have the ability to connect with anybody, planet, pretty much at any time. You're in the US, I'm in the UK, we're sort of connected as such. But so often we see people living life using their phones almost as a barrier to connection, as a barrier to life. And they sit on the sofa, look across, and the partner and the children are all on their phones, and you're on your phone, or you're on the bus, or wherever. I think one of the reasons I really love having conversations like this is that I feel that I have your presence and attention for an extended period of time. It's very rare in real life. I sort of sit down and a conversation like this where I think there's really listening and thinking as you are. So I think giving somebody your present, being present and truly being there for somebody must be a very, very rare people. People can feel incredibly emotional, incredibly grateful, incredibly and I will use the word almost used in a way by the fact that, gosh, there's almost there's no real escaping presence. She's sort of here and she's not going anywhere. She's not letting go, and she's there. And it's how do people, and I guess people's very general, how is there a general sense that people have when they first feel or presence with them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. I feel very seen by you, Andrew. Thank you for receiving me so deeply. Yeah, so to paint some context for this, to answer your question and tie it together with something that we were, well, that I brought up earlier, those contractions inside of us want our attention. They want our presence. They want to be heard. They would love to be ironed out. They would love to be experiencing more harmony. Dissonance wants harmony. It needs loving presence to open up and find that harmony. So when clients come to me, there's some mix of, on one hand, wow, this person can hear me. This person can actually hear me. I feel heard in a way that I have not experienced before, or perhaps it's been a long time and a very rare experience that I've felt heard in this way. And so there's that feeling of being received. On the other hand, inevitably, at some point we'll kind of reach a resistance to the being heard, a resistance to the presence, for a number of reasons. It's foreign. It feels, the contractions at some point they feel safe and comfortable staying contracted. Though they might want to open up and iron out, there's a safety that has been found in the contraction and in how it manifests as emotional reactivity, in staying at a job that's not really enjoyable, but it pays well, in continuing to stay single because dating is hard, right? Well, whatever these playing small but safe patterns are, there's a sense of security in that. So when encountering this full presence that really is an invitation to open up and reveal oneself and be ironed out, what the client and I will inevitably encounter, even if they're very receptive to being heard and to that presence, even to a great degree, inevitably we'll run into a bit of defensiveness that comes up around the contraction, because the contraction is feeling threatened. People would say the ego, right? The ego, or the inauthentic ego, or the lower self, or the inner child, right? These different ways that we conceptualize is feeling threatened in its in the safety of playing small is feeling threatened. And so then that defensiveness can come up in a number of ways, whether that's avoidance and a sharp or gradual changing of the topic. Maybe the person starts to kind of like blank out. They just suddenly are very foggy. They're having a hard time focusing and being present with the conversation. Maybe their body starts to move a lot, right? They get really fidgety. There's all kinds of ways that edge manifests itself when it comes into contact with a loving presence that's really offering, like, hey, if you're willing, if you're open and willing, um, you can let go. You can open up and let go.
You said at the beginning of this part of the conversation, the person that we know the best is the person we go to every night. So ourselves. So do you feel that you love and acknowledge who you are? That's part one. And then part two is, you obviously, well, you have a need to keep exploring who you are, and you don't feel satisfied in the most positive way with knowing what you know now. So how do you, so first of all, do you deeply love who you are? And then secondly, how do you know how much more there is to explore?
Yeah. Again, great questions. Yeah, so first, just to clarify, yeah, the thing that I say is I'm the only one who's going to be going to bed with myself every night for, well, for the rest of my life, and I'm the only one who's going to bed every night with myself for my whole life. Meaning, yeah, I'm the only one who has the opportunity to know myself, to truly know myself. And yeah, that is a continuous process, that in my experience has different different phases. And are you familiar with the term Gestalt, as in Gestalt therapy?
Yes.
Yeah, so the idea that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. So in my experience, yeah, so in my experience, there's the experience of greater and greater levels of gestalts, greater and greater experiences of wholes, of a whole sense of self. And there is some attachment that I have to continuing to get to know myself. It's something that I've become especially present to over the last year or so, namely because of the person because of my current partner, who is quite the opposite of me in this way. He has a great deal of peace with just an organic unfolding of getting to know himself. He does not have any chase in that at all. Whereas I'm learning to slow down my chase and to be more present. And likewise, he's learning to add some fuel to the process, to appreciate the the benefits of exploring that a little more, of adding some fire to his process. And the current way I think about it is that even if I get to a point at which I per se know my whole self, whatever that means, I'm until the point that I stop having new experiences, there will always be more to learn about myself because we are relational creatures. We live in a relational universe experience. And ultimately that's the way that we get to know ourselves is through relationship, whether that's an intra-relating between different parts of ourself or an inter-relating between ourself and the world. It is a relational experience. So even if one of the gestalts that I arrive at is this, I know exactly who I am, absent outside influence. Will that ever really remain stagnant, or constant per se? And there is a that's one of the many dualities is, there's always a sense of, there's always some kind of consistency and there's always some kind of change. And as long as I'm continuing to engage in new experiences, I'm going to continue learning about, okay, well, who is Rosie in the light of this experience, or who is Rosie when if I decide to go into this new kind of darkness, right? There's always going to be that additive factor. Yeah. And I'm open to the idea that I will, I guess, reach a gestalt that feels more, I guess, finalized in the sense of who I am as an individual. I have not yet reached that, and I can note as we talk that I feel some resistance to that being something that really happens. At least that's not, I'm guessing that if and when I get there, I will have a better way to phrase it.
It almost feels, and this might not make sense, but it almost feels that if we reach a point where we truly know ourselves, that's the end, really. Sort of, we've won the game, we finished the game. Oh, okay. Because that we should then just disappear into the ether, have reached that that point of understanding, and maybe that is what happens, that we reach that point. But I like the way you created the context that it's we can know ourselves internally, but as soon as we get different external situations, external stimuli, it's very difficult to know ourselves. So which I guess is why a lot of people that have gone off to find themselves go off to a quiet place where it's just themselves and themselves. There's very little external stimuli, so they can just focus completely on themselves. If you're traveling or talking or meeting somebody, you're having all these external things coming at you, and you're somebody different. So I'm a different you than I am talking to my children or talking to my partner or to somebody else, because of the synapses in my head. I feel very different. I mean, that's ourselves almost in isolation, which it either feels selfish or it feels like the goal, but knowing ourselves and within a broader context is where it's more interesting, I guess. Because, like I say, you're a different person with your partner today than you were with your partner of 5 years ago, or with with your friends, whatever, and they'll see a different person. And I guess what we can't necessarily know is how others see us and how other people see people that are observing us. So it becomes it's very philosophical. I'll ask questions. So some of the things you say on your website, and you say on the website that throughout your life, that's
Andrew, may I?
Cool.
Before we continue,
Please.
may I share something on that idea of reaching a point at which we, fully know ourselves is like that's represented in the idea of at the end of that lifetime we would then the idea in Buddhism that we'd then like go to nirvana, that idea that we've come to a balance with our karma, or well, and most sects of Christianity don't extend the self-actualization process to the individual, but the idea that we would then have completed the ascension like Christ, right? We have these philosophical and religious ideas for getting to that point at which, whether and then different ways to conceptualize that, whether it is more of a poof, and a leaving this world like through the body, or it is a dying and then simply not returning. And even then I find it fascinating that we do like with those examples of people who have supposedly transcended the human experience, we still continue to maintain this sense of relationship to that energy, right? So then that begs the question, okay, if I did reach that point in this lifetime per se, and I rose into the air, or I died and then maintained a greater sense of self after death, that's still being in relationship with the vastness of the cosmos, which it just brings me back to this question of getting to know the self, and I love looking at that at the most macrocosmic level of recognizing that yes, we have individual selves, just like we have individual cells and individual components of our cell, and at the most macro level, there is one self that is the system. There is one system, right? So that process of getting to know the self can be thought of as I'm getting to know Rosie, and it can also be thought of as I'm getting to know the one system that I'm a part of, through the reflection of my individual experience. So I imagine that if there is that point of like fully knowing the self, that it would require a very comprehensive knowing of the whole self, the whole system, not just the self in isolation, are my thoughts.
I love this conversation. So a couple of things, one of which is a sign, two of which are comments, I guess. It took me too long to recognize that there isn't a difference between humans and nature. I don't know, I we're humans and there's nature. And I think once I sort of realized that actually, no, we're all our atoms are from somewhere else. This is where we are today. This is we are nature. There's no distinction, whatever. That really changed my mind a little bit. The second thing I think that touched on this a little bit, I think, is that we go through all of our lifetimes as energy, and at the moment, your energy and mine, a form that we recognize as being human. That's what our energy is. But I have a real belief that we get to this understand, then move on to, maybe a better word to put it, we want to move on to the next dimension. And I feel the next dimension is whatever your term reference is for it, whether it's angels or spirits or psychedelic beings or stations of energy, but in a very, very different way. I think many people go through the human cycle many, many times because they don't get to a point where they know themselves, or their next energy might manifest itself as a beautiful tree or an amazing bird or an amazing creature. And I think that, build on this knowledge through the different manifestations of energy, we get to the next dimension, and maybe even the dimension after that, which is where love or love sits, I guess, because everything is about love, or certainly should be. Together. So I think our energy moves through the dimensions as we become more and more of who we are. And I haven't explained it as well as you did, and bring those words out to me. And some people have probably listened, but I really do think, and I would be destroyed if I felt for a second, well, this is it really. So at some point I'm going to die, I'll be eaten, turn into worm food, which is fine, and that'll be it. And then Rose and all of her amazing knowledge, that's going to go, and that's it. That's just not a design that I comprehend as being realistic. So I really do think there are these dimensions that progress through as we almost become more and more in tune with who we are. And who knows what the angels and the different spirits bring in them in. But I think it's sharing that knowledge with people that they feel are receptive to it. So the angels have helped sort of push the knowledge into you and sort of almost feeling sort of wafting it towards you because you're receptive now. Whereas before your traumatic experience, you're more closed up. The people you work with are more physically, mentally closed off. As they open up, it's almost here's a receptor for the information, knowledge that we can share. I've not made any sense whatsoever, but it's the best way I can describe what I felt then.
I hear you.
Thank you.
I hear you.
Yeah, no, I thank you for bringing the presence to let me say that. Really, so I haven't said that before out loud to anybody. So your presence welcomes those in a way. Because they just poured out of me. It's okay. So you just to turn this one off, ask some questions again. But it just they just felt like the right time to expose that thought, really. One thing I wanted to ask you was about your, and I think my belief as well, that the core truth that having authentic self-expression is the key to vitality. And I wonder if you could expand upon that realization a little bit.
Yeah, so let's start by examining the contrast between two different generalized ways of living. One being living from the outside in, which is living a life based on what we've been told, what we are being told, what we have been told in the distant past that is buried in our subconscious that we're not aware of. That's living life from the outside in. It's allowing external influences to write our story for us. Um, and you might feel, some of your listeners might feel, even just in entertaining that idea of from the outside in, there is this sense of pressure and constriction and confinement, that is pushing in on the self, the self that is inside. Okay, and then, opposite of that is, of course, living from the inside out, which is getting in touch with what is inside, which for most of us requires doing some backlogged cleanup work, whether that's from this life, past lives, inherited trauma, however we want to conceptualize that, whatever is true. At the end of the day, that doesn't matter so much necessarily, at least for the experience, as simply bringing presence to whatever is inside that is veiling or getting in the way of making deeper contact with the self, with the authentic self, with the light that is inside. And we could play with tapping into the physics of that, and appreciating, biophotonic energy that is emanating from the inside out, and how that, in a very, physical way, affects those around us, our mood, our physical health, the decisions that we make, etc. We want to grow that light and have it be clearer, and be clear on the directions and channels we're giving it to shine that feel authentic for us, as opposed to stifling that light, smashing it down by allowing things outside of us to dictate who we are. Yeah, so that's, so that learning to live from the inside out is one way that we could refer to that process of getting in touch with and living with more and more vibrancy and coherence, the authentic self. And that requires that often difficult, uncomfortable work of peeling back the layers that have gunked up over that light over time, again from wherever they came from. That process of bringing loving awareness and presence to the parts of ourselves that are dissonant, meaning not harmonious, so that they can feel free to be seen and open up and reveal themselves and iron out. At which point, the really lovely thing is they will dissipate. They will leave. I love the you've probably heard this before, maybe, I'm guessing, that referring to emotions as energy in motion, and that the natural state of emotions is to move. The natural state for human beings, just like all animals, is movement. So many of us are so stagnant today, not only internally, not only mentally, not only emotionally, but physically. If there's one thing that we can do to really start to give more permission to our emotions and to our mental state to shift and change, it's inviting more physical movement into our lives, especially things that are less structured and more flowy. So like dance, for example, is a great tool. Stretching, yoga, things like lifting weights and like running can also be very helpful. And there's even in those things, there's a rigidity that can continue to maintain the corresponding, internal rigidity. Yeah, and through that process of bringing presence to the stagnant energy, the contracted energy. And I just love tapping in through emotions because there's always an emotional component. And I like referring to emotions as the universal equalizer. They're the great equalizer. We may, it may be very, very different experiences that taught you what anger is versus teaching me what anger is, and very different triggers that trigger anger in you versus that trigger anger in me. But we both know what it feels like to be angry. We all know what it feels like to be sad. We all know what it feels like to be lonely, to feel happy, to feel joy, to feel peace. Even if some of us aren't able to access those in every moment, they are a component, an inherent component of our human experience that we can learn to access by, again, clearing up whatever may be in the way. So I tend to bring it back to emotions, and there's other ways that other points of entry that can be used to tap into what's going on inside. And so as we allow those energies, those emotions to be energy in motion and allow them to move, that light inside of us continues to grow and to build. We continue to have more presence, and it really is a very organic and exponentially increasing process, like a snowball rolling down the hill. If we are continuing to give loving presence and awareness to the process, the answers per se, or the clarity, does just come. It just comes in. It's no longer something that needs to be searched for. It's actually a matter of, can I tune in? Can I be quiet enough? To listen to what's already inside me? And then can I be brave enough to step into that, to take action, to embody that inner knowing, that inner wisdom? And because it is this beautiful snowball effect, it's so obviously effective. It so obviously has positive results over the integration period, which is not to say that that's always comfortable or easy, and it does become obviously effective. It becomes radically easier over time to listen, to duplicate that process, to listen to the self, to continue to take action, to embody, and to continue to listen even deeper and do it over and over and over again because of that positive feedback. So something that I tell my clients often is, remember, even though this may be very hard for you now, it's just because it's new. Like anything, it's just because it's new. The more you do it, the more you'll want to do it. It will get much easier, radically so. Yeah, to live that, to get in touch with and live that authentic truth.
It's something that society, I'm not quite sure what that means, but anyway, society, things in general around us, teaches us to repress or manage at a very young age. You'll often hear in a business setting, you don't need to be so emotional. Why are you being so emotional? As a very negative thing. And if you think back to when we were younger, and I assume you don't still do this, to a supermarket, you have a tantrum, you throw yourself on the floor and you're banging your arms up and down, and you're fine again. We don't do that typically. We happens, somebody cuts us up in the car, somebody bumps our trolley, whatever, and we don't have a and I feel almost those, they're almost little shadows store within, and we're not letting them out really. So it's these emotions either come out in a you might not want to see, or you become emotional in a way you can't control, whatever. So I think I do really think there's so much power in recognizing them, and then and live. But I think we are. Certainly in Western society anyway, we're sort of taught that our emotions are, well, people say you wear your emotion on your sleeve, which is like, well, so you show your emotions, okay. And if you actually do show an emotion of whatever type, it's something that people are sometimes uncomfortable with, I think. So I think teaching people that an authentic part of yourself is your emotions, because again, you're the only person that has those emotions and feels what you feel for that certain time. And I wondered, so you do a lot with emotional intimacy, a lot with somatic awareness of the body and intentional communication. So so a lot of that is about the thought and how we think and how we feel. How does the body come into play with that? How do we bring the body to connect with the emotional intimacy and the awareness of who we are?
Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah, the body is often the most direct way to access the repressed emotional energy that is most readily available to actually be processed, as well as it's a very direct way to access that repressed emotional energy. Dr. Joe Dispenza again refers to the body as the subconscious mind, and that is very true. That as we're holding back that tantrum, or and when I say holding back, I mean repressing. So I'm not meaning like being present with and choosing to not say the thing that is probably not the best thing to say to your coworker, right? But actually like ignoring that anger or frustration or sadness or whatever it is underneath that inclination to throw a tantrum or spark an argument, whatever it is. As we, from infancy, oftentimes are pushing away those emotions that we naturally feel, because we're living with an outside-in approach, which is actually it's a very natural thing, in many cases to do as a child, because as children we are naturally codependent. So unless we happen to be blessed with perfect parents, um, there is going to be some level of learning to live from the outside in, because that's what keeps us safe, or that's what we perceive to be keeping us safe, is to conform to the perceived expectations of our parents, whether that's a direct, whether that's an explicit direction from a parent, or other authority figure, or something as simple as, oh, I noticed that when I get loud, mom looks uncomfortable, and so I'm gonna be a little quieter because I don't like seeing mom look uncomfortable. And so all of that repressed emotional energy, especially over time as these tendencies to repress become habit, get stored inside the body in various ways. There are lots of different models for how that works, which are super fascinating to me. But more or less, we could just leave it on the surface. for now and say that those emotional energies get stored inside the body and over time result in physical, mental, and emotional illness. Um, so in that sense, just to quickly tie back into my story, perhaps nothing acute happened, and it was just suddenly a boiling over of
Yeah.
patterns that had turned, or tendencies that had turned into habits, that had turned into patterns. Um, yeah, and so one of the most direct ways to access because, well, especially for someone um, who is working through especially major traumas, but even micro traumas,
Mhm.
um, working with emotions can oftentimes actually just lead to exaggerating the emotion. It doesn't always end up resolving, or finding some kind of conclusion, and then greater clarity, right?
Mm.
And while emotions are fabulous data and insight, I also, it's also very valuable to bear in mind, like, I also don't want my emotions to be controlling my experience. I don't want my
Yeah.
thoughts to be controlling my experience. I don't want my emotions to be controlling my experience. I don't want my body to be controlling my experience. I want my awareness, my conscious awareness of those things um, to be guiding, controlling, guiding, making decisions, creating visions, reparenting the parts of myself that are still immature. Um, yeah, so tapping into the body and doing that through a somatic practice, so meaning tapping in through sensation. So
Mhm.
maybe, and people are often very foreign to the sensations that are in their bodies. Um, Maybe that's just a persistent feeling of tightness in the gut, or queasiness in the gut, or a feeling kind of sparkiness in the chest, or a tightness in the shoulder. All these different sensations, infinitely nuanced, right? And this is such a special, unique journey for each individual, tuning into, giving presence to how does my body feel? I mean, just imagining the vast amounts of surface in the body, right? So not just like the skin, but like the surface along the outside and inside cover of every organ, and all the different parts inside every organ, and then going even down to the cellular level. I mean, I can't even imagine the easily trillions, if not more, whatever the tiny little measurement would be, just of the surface area that is inside the body. And we have the ability, through increasing our presence, to tune in with all of those, tiny little nuances that are calling for our attention, for our care, for our nurturing, for our teaching, right? For our reparenting or raising. Um, yeah, and that's more, I guess, advanced stuff further along the road, but just to start, just giving presence to something like, oh, there's a tightness in my throat, right? And then starting to notice, over time, by becoming more tuned in to the throat, oh, this tightness comes up when I'm around, these particular people, okay? And then it seems to come up at this particular point in the conversation. And oh, I'm starting to realize that this tightness comes up when I want to say something, but I'm not giving myself permission to say it. Maybe there's something about these people that I'm letting get in the way
Mm.
of me speaking what I would like to express, right? And so in that way, we can use those somatic nuances to come to deeper emotional and mental realizations about ourselves, right? That emotional sense of I don't feel permission here. I'm getting in my own way. Maybe there's something that I'm perceiving as threatening about these people. Maybe there's a feeling of fear there. And then the thoughts around that are maybe like, oh, if I say this thing, they might not like it. Oh, if I say
Yeah.
this thing, it might be the end of the relationship, right? Whatever it is. So, um, yeah, so we can use the body just like we can use the emotions, just like we can use the mind as a fabulous point of entry for, just to take our shovel, our introspective shovel, and, dig up a little bit of dirt, right? And see what's underneath there. Um,
And we obviously have developed the ability to derive pleasure from our bodies, our bodies in association with another person, and I wondered how a deeper understanding of our emotions and our physical presence can help enhance different levels of intimacy and pleasure, I guess. Pleasure is a funny word. It's not one we hear very often, really. And I always think when people talk about sex, I always think, well, you're really talking about pleasure, because I think, again, society's got this view of sex as being very much an act, and that's the thing, really. We talk about foreplay as almost being before the act, so that can't be the act, can it? But if you think about it as being pleasure, how does a deeper understanding of our emotions and our physical presence help us to create that intimacy with another person?
yeah, beautiful question. Yeah, and I like what you bring up. That is, we don't hear that word very often, and I feel like it's a worthwhile question to
Hmm.
ask. Why don't we hear the word pleasure very often, or whatever other synonyms
Mhm.
around that word are. And and off the cusp, my impression is, well, because most of us aren't experiencing that much pleasure. Most of us
Yeah.
are not experiencing certainly anywhere near the amounts of pleasure, joy, ecstasy, happiness, even contentment that we have the ability to, that we have the capacity to experience. Yeah, and then okay, so why is that? Well, um, if we can entertain the idea that the authentic self, that light inside, is one that emanates something around that cluster of emotions: pleasure, joy, peace, ecstasy, contentment, bliss. If we can entertain that as a possibility, and that's that's my experience. That's the experience of many others. It's touted in many philosophies and traditions. Um, then that brings us back to this idea that, well, I'm going to experience pleasure. The amount of pleasure I experience is directly correlated to how in touch I am with my authentic self.
Mhm.
Um, and so, and as I peel back those emotional layers, thought layers, physical discomforts, pains that are in the way of me experiencing my authentic self, I naturally experience more and more pleasure. Um, Now, yes, we have the beautiful opportunity in relationship with other people to oftentimes it can feel easier to access pleasure with another person, especially a newer person oftentimes, right? Like, oh, this person is exciting and brings a fresh perspective and reminds me, really, like it's a reminder of, oh, there's newness and freshness inside of me too. And I'm letting that out more easily because I'm with this new person. I maybe don't feel so attached to them yet, so I don't have as much defensiveness up. I'm not limiting myself as much. And that kind of freedom in relationship and the increased pleasure that comes along with it can certainly continue as we maintain a relationship with someone. It's just often most obvious on the cusp of the relationship, or maybe a little ways in as we get to know the person. But then most of us will get to a point in a relationship with another person where we realize, oh, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. Actually, there's like, this person has messy parts of them, and those messy parts somehow magically just correspond to the messy parts in me. And oh my gosh, if we're not really present, we start poking each other and triggering each other and bringing out those messy parts, which will get in the way of experiencing more pleasure. Okay, so then circling back to your question, what does it look like to continue to allow pleasure in an intimate relationship as those messy parts come up? And what does it look like to increase the amount of pleasure that we can experience with another person, even if we've been in relationship with them for many years, many decades? How can we do that? Well, it requires being present with the negative, per se, emotions, or the uncomfortable emotions, although they may actually feel more comfortable in many ways than the potential pleasure. But whatever those, lots of ways to say this, oftentimes people have, charge around the different ways to say this, but lower frequency or more negative emotions, as those negative emotions come up, as they start to intervene, and we feel that edge, that edge of our capacity to experience pleasure. So let's imagine that we all have, and this, I'm just parroting off an idea that Dr. Gay Hendricks talks about. He talks about this idea of a happiness thermostat. Like, all of us have a happiness thermostat that gets set to a particular temperature very early in life. And then as we go through life, we tend to do what we can, whether that's on the positive end or the self-sabotaging end, to keep ourselves in that range that was set as a child. Yeah. So in order to experience more pleasure, we have to be willing to push that edge, right? To increase that thermostat so that our capacity to experience pleasure is larger, which will require working through whatever negative emotions come up that would be impeding that pleasure, whether guilt, shame, judgment. This happens. This is so sad. I mean, just devastatingly common with women during sex, is that, and men have their own version of this. And I just hear about the women's side so often from my clients. Almost all of my clients, all of them currently are men. And I just hear about the stories, their current path. I mean, many men who have told me these stories of, and certainly I've experienced this in my own relationships, of being in an intimate situation. Maybe that's emotional, maybe it's sexual. Certainly sexual intimacy brings these emotions to the forefront much more rapidly, often, of feeling, and it's very similar actually to that, how a great depth of presence from someone can feel threatening to the contraction, right? And likewise, a great opportunity for potential pleasure can feel very threatening to negative emotions that are stored in the body.
Yeah.
So for many people, and it seems to be, this just seems, in my experience, it seems to be much more obvious in women, in sexually intimate situations, that a woman's body will get very reactive and push away sexual intimacy, because she starts experiencing emotionally and somatically repressed emotions like fear, like guilt, like self-judgment, anger, grief. All of these emotions will surface rapidly, especially if a woman has experienced trauma, and especially major traumas, in the face of sexual intimacy. And maybe these feelings emerge very obviously. It's also possible that she might repress them even further, on either end. Again, um, not being present, but overly reactive in one direction or another, which oftentimes just is a totally baffling and, well, disempowering for both people, but men just often have no understanding of this. They take it very personally. They don't know how to hold
Yeah.
space to help a woman process those emotions. And women don't know how to hold space for themselves to process those emotions. So, like we've been coming back to, I mean, the key that here really is greater presence, and learning to recognize culturally, collectively, that sex is one of the fastest ways to trigger repressed negative emotion. I, it's the reason that tantric Kriya yoga can work so well, so rapidly to facilitate healing and growth, is because sexual energy is so powerful in that it can be a fuel to clear out repressed emotions. But if we don't know that, if we're not aware that that's a possibility and that it's going on, and we don't have the tools to be present with those emotions when they come up, then it gets messy very fast. So I'll just give a quick example. My boyfriend is very used to me doing all kinds of weird things to release emotional energy, in our foreplay and while we have sex. It used to be more, and certainly in past relationships, was more things along the lines of crying, screaming, whimpering, like there was more negativity that was coming up. Now it tends to be more things, still occasionally some crying for sure. Maybe coughing is one way that the body releases pent up contractions. Laughing, I laugh a lot, just very spontaneously while having sex. Again, it's just a way that the body is recalibrating and regulating and using that sexual energy to clear repressed emotions. And in this case, I laugh a lot because I have a backlog. I've had a backlog of sadness stored. So when I encounter high levels of pleasure, my body will laugh, as a way to clear out that lingering sadness. And that's required levels of presence, self-awareness that most people just have not given themselves the opportunity to learn. And so, years ago, what was coming up in those moments for me, I would often either just cut off the experience. I don't want to have sex. I don't want to do this. I feel yucky. I feel I wouldn't say these things, right? But I would feel yucky, gross inside, and just I don't know how to deal with this, so I don't want to do it. And then there was a period of a lot of expressing very negative emotions, though receiving pleasure from another person. It's a very, in a sense, self-contradictory experience. Um, that's there was a lot there. Thank you for hearing all of that.
No, thank you for sharing. And I know like I said, you work primarily with men, and I wondered if, so perhaps as we've been with our partners and it depends on the dynamic, I guess, but it could be a month, it could be 6 months, it could be 10 years, it could be 30 years, and we maybe have desires and thoughts we struggle to express, or we may have got into this, our thermostat is always at the same temperature within 1 or 2 degrees, and okay, if it goes above that, oh my goodness, I couldn't handle that. If it goes below that, we feel a bit sad. Do you think that's part of the reason why men in particular seek out sex workers, or they might think about having an affair because they feel that they can't express built-up need or a desire or whatever it is to their current partner, but they feel differently about somebody they're paying, or somebody that they're seeing in a hotel room once every 2 months or whatever?
Yes, absolutely. And actually I've come to find a very positive spin on that, even the desire that a man might have to step outside their marriage to seek that sexual expression, with all of the messiness that comes along with that. What that tells me about that man is that he is still open to and doing his best to receive and take action on his authentic self-expression. And oftentimes men just don't know how to facilitate the experience for their, if they have a partner. Oftentimes they just don't know how to facilitate the kind of experience for their partner that would allow her or them to be, or him to be open to receiving what he would like to give. So men will sometimes seek out, and often, and much more often than they do, will desire seeking out a place to take action to express that part of themselves, which tells me, hey, you know what, there's an aliveness in you, there's a spark in you that you're listening to, and maybe if you're open to it, there's some different ways to channel that energy that will maybe help you stay in your integrity more. Let's just celebrate the first thing that's going on, which is you're still in touch with that vital life force in yourself, which is a very valuable thing.
So if I make an appointment with you and I say I've been married for 20 years and we occasionally have sex, and but I want more intimacy, and I think we both deserve more pleasure, and I'm thinking about stepping outside the marriage to get the pleasure somewhere else, and that's quite complicated, and I don't want to risk a divorce, I don't want to upset anybody. How would how would our conversation go when I first come to see you and put this on the table?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things in such a situation that I prioritize speaking to during that first meeting. One being, um, I can do what I can do, which is offer you tools and resources and space and facilitation for you to open up and get more clarity on yourself and aligned actions that you can take in your life to be more you. And then there are things that you can do, which are the things that are in your control. Taking accountability for yourself, um, and living a personally responsible life, putting it very simply. Um, what I have no control over and what you have no control over are your wife. We don't have any control over your wife. That's the short end of it. What any of us will find as we make changes in ourselves is that ripples out into our relationships, most potently into our most intimate, our closest relationships. And so in that, there is much potential for relational change, for changes in your relationship, in this example client's relationship with his wife. And part of getting there, part of getting to that point of change will be letting go of surrendering the need to change her, because any of us, all of us, change when we're offered spaciousness. That's what I'll be modeling to, I'd tell the client that that's what I'll be modeling to you. And it will be in your best interest to model that with your wife, right? To offer her the spaciousness to open up at her own pace and to feel inspired through your changes, through your personal transformation. Yeah, so that's an important thing to note on the offset, just the boundaries of what I can offer and what he can control. Now getting into the weeds there a little more, okay, and let's say he's coming to me and he's like, I'm so my sex drive is so high. I would love to be having sex, at least 1 to 2 more times a week. She's just not into it. We love each other, but she's just not open to it. I feel like I'm going crazy, right? Like, and this is a common experience for a lot of men is that they do start to feel like they're like kind of driven mad in a sense by their sexual desire and their sexual drive. And they don't know how to channel that into other spaces. So something that we would then start exploring is ways for him to take greater responsibility for his sex drive by finding other outlets for that energy, for that creative energy. So maybe that's an enhanced level of masturbation practice, meaning that, I'm giving him instructions, not live, not in sessions, but take-home instructions for tantric masturbation techniques that are teaching him to have greater control and presence with his sex drive. Maybe that's us doing different practices, using different tools to help him get in touch with different ways that he can channel that energy into creative processes, getting in touch more with, because even before puberty, we all had a sense of that creative, vital life force energy that becomes sexuality. And as children, we express that through doing things like coloring, like having a garden, like cooking, right? Like building a fort, like running through the woods and finding a stick that looks like a good sword and whacking a tree with it, right? We find ways to channel that energy. So especially for men who are in a situation where at that point, their wife is not receptive to the level of sexual intimacy that they would like to have, um, one of the things that we look at are what are some other ways that you can channel this energy that will in fact not only relieve that pressure, but it will also create a deeper sense of self-fulfillment in you, and so that you will no longer be outsourcing the need for that outlet to someone else, right? We're moving away from that outside in perspective and we're moving towards an inside out, by finding a different way to channel that energy that is not reliant on another human being. And then the fantastic thing about doing these things is that it actually makes him more attractive to her. It helps him have a greater amount of presence with her process. He'll start to have more creative ways to approach her, maybe realizing gaps in his ability to be emotionally available for her in ways that he hasn't realized before, right? And realizing more the things that he can do, whether it's that he just organically realizes them or that he just has the presence to ask, right? to ask her, what can he do to be more available for her? And still, ultimately, there is a level of choice that's required with the wife, whether or not she wants to go on that journey, as much as he's saying yes to. And in any situation, one partner or one member of any relationship taking greater responsibility for themselves, learning to transmute the energies, the dissonance inside of them to create more harmony as an individual, will actually, through quantum entanglement, sometimes very immediately and spontaneously produce changes in those who they're in relationship with.
I love how you brought the quantum into that. So that takes me back to what I was saying before about the different dimensions. I think sometimes we are linked via the quantum to other dimensions. Sometimes we bring things back with us, and that's funny. And it's almost the prequel to moving to that next dimension. And I think a lot of the things you said there completely resonate with what I think. And I think as children before puberty, even when we're sort of 2 and 3 and 4 years old, we're fascinated with our bodies, and the little boys always have their hands down their trousers or whatever. But at that stage, very often our hand is slapped away and we're told it's dirty, stop doing that. And we never actually get the time to spend with our own body and know what brings us pleasure or not. And I talked to a wonderful lady a few months ago. She's in her mid to late 70s now, and she's been doing tantra for decades. And she was saying there's only once she did that and really started to understand what feelings were all about and how presence is so important. And she was saying with her partner, she has a very robust sex life with her equally 70 or 80-year-old partner, and she said they can very much tell if one person isn't present. She said the other day they were having sex and they were doing the actions, they were physically having sex, but she said to him, well, where are you? You're just not present. You're going through the emotions. He's like, oh God, yeah, I did. I drifted away for a minute. And it sort of brought him back into she said she could literally feel it. She could feel he wasn't, even though he was inside her and they were having sex, she could feel he wasn't present with her. And she was so in tune with his presence or expectation. So I think masturbation, touching ourselves, understanding our own body is something that we don't explore when we're young, and as we get older, we think that sex is something we do with somebody else as opposed to with ourselves. I think a lot of men, and I count myself in this camp, is that we might say, oh, my wife doesn't want to have sex as often as I want. She doesn't want to have sex. She doesn't feel like sex. And you think, and I almost think I should ask myself, so is my wife really saying she doesn't want to take part in pleasure? She doesn't want pleasure. She doesn't want joy. And that's the difference. So actually, whilst one of us might not want to have intercourse, and it could be me, it could be her, on one particular night, then actually there's no reason why we can't look at each other for 10 minutes, why I can't brush her hair, why I can't, hold her hand, why I can't. All of those things are pleasurable, you would hope, to the person. And we bucket this sort of intercourse as one thing versus that thing we talked about before, pleasure and desire and joy and bliss. And if you think, well, I doubt very much that my wife doesn't want to have pleasure in her life. It's just how do we have that conversation so that when I make the move I typically make, which might be rubbing her ear or kissing her neck, or instance, I'm going, okay, he wants intercourse now. But what I'm actually talking about, no, let's just figure out how we give each other pleasure, which I think is a really different way of understanding it. That, and you phrased it, pleasure, bliss, connection, all those things are very different than thinking about sexual intercourse, because that can be part of it, but such a small part of it in many ways, I think. So yeah, that's where I'm on that one. So what would you say, or is it even possible to say what you find the most rewarding part of what you do? Because you do so much and you offer so much. Where do you feel the most once something's happened? What gives you the most positive emotions when you've been dealing with clients?
Watching a client realizing a new gestalt, watching a client, and it's very obvious. It can be seen. Watching a person have that aha moment of, oh, I'm actually not who I thought I was. I'm actually this whole other thing. And I had no idea before, but now I know.
It must be pretty special.
It never gets old.
Because you that's the right way to say it, because you invest yourselves with your clients. And like you said, you say that I can only take you so far, I can only sort of guide you in this way. I can't solve the situation for you, but you do invest a lot of your obvious energy and your presence with them. Do you face a problem sometimes that clients almost like a transference, that they want to connect with you or feel they're connected to you in a deeper way than they should with a therapist or a coach or a guide?
Yes. That's a loose yes. So yes, the phenomenon that you're asking about does happen pretty regularly, and I have become it's definitely a phenomenon that grows me a lot, that really holds me to the fire as a practitioner, as a facilitator, and it's an edge that I realized, especially through my time in sex work, that experience can just be another opportunity for the client's self-awareness and self-realization, if namely if I'm willing to hold the boundary, and to communicate about that in a way that is non-projective, and if they're willing to confront that honestly. So what example can I pull up? Especially that is, maybe not super recent. I mean, I've definitely had a pattern of experiences. This doesn't happen so much now, definitely more in the past, of clients who would have this kind of background fantasy in their mind that that there was some that well and really at least how I tended to perceive it, that they would have a hard time imagining that someone could love them so much without being romantically interested in them.
Yeah.
So then there would that story would kind of play out, in that like different a variety of clients over the years have kind of tried to nose their way into creating, right, that
Yeah.
that the manifestation of that romantic fantasy. Um, and like anything else that comes up, and really this is just another, I mean, defense mechanism in a way,
Mm.
uh, getting in the way of a more pure, honest, authentic love. And what I've learned is that whether it's that way of a fantasy manifesting, or I've had experiences in the past where clients have stopped working with me as a practitioner, but then will want to, oh, I'll be in the area. May I take you to lunch? I'd love to catch up. And however it is that they're
Mm.
approaching me in a way that it would not be authentic for me to engage, right? And me staying present with simply my authenticity, which required working through a lot of, how dare you ask me such a thing, right? In the past, there was lots of being offended by these things and angry, and why are you making me do this extra work, blah, 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 blah. And as I came to actually be able to receive what was being offered as a compliment, of, oh, this is another way they're offering love, it's not
Mm.
resonant for me, and my answer is no. And actually being present with them instead of, and with my triggered emotions, so that I could then respond from a place of love, which is a loving boundary of, um, that doesn't feel aligned for me. Thank you for the offer. Um, I hope you're well, right? Whatever it is, like, and it can just be that, which is just a continuation of I'm gonna continue to love you into loving yourself more. Um,
It's funny, isn't it, how we um, understand love in different ways. Really, I've always, my friends have always been female. I've always had very, very female friends, and I absolutely have loved some of my female friends. Really love them, but not in a sexual way, and not thinking, oh gosh, yeah, but maybe one day there's a chance. No, it just hasn't come up really. It's just always been a very different relationship. I've not been afraid to recognize that they love me and I love them, and it can be threatening for your sort of defined partner as such if they feel different. I have situations where relationships have gone awry because of the love I've felt for another person that they felt for me. But it is a very different love, no less pure, and sometimes more pure, because sex doesn't get in the way. But it's I think when people struggle, some people say, oh gosh, men and women can never be friends. There's always that sexual tension there. Well, no, there isn't really. It's almost insulting to put that on somebody, and to think, well, no, my base urges I can't possibly resist somebody of the opposite sex. It just doesn't make any sense, does it? It's so I think there's a huge amount in recognizing love has many manifestations, and if we're fortunate enough to feel the love of somebody else, wow, that's amazing, isn't it? If somebody loves us, or loves part of us, or loves something that we do, or we feel, or we are, what could be more wonderful than that, really? So accepting that for what it is, I think, is such a powerful thing, really. You mentioned there about you had experience of sex work in the past, and I wasn't going to ask it, but I was curious. Did you enjoy your time doing that, and did that highlight anything to you in the way that men think about desire and intimacy?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I did enjoy it very much. It was also very challenging. Often it was a kind of I I enjoy I enjoy I enjoy a chosen challenge. I enjoy um, a challenge that is something I'm saying yes to willingly. And when I chose to say yes to that opportunity to work as a sensual masseuse, is what I was doing on and off for about 4 years, for about 2.5 years over that time. Um, I what what kind of pushed me over the edge, as I was, making my mental pros and cons list per se, the pro that really was like, okay, like I'm a yes, I'll do it, was recognizing that the work was going to be challenging and that it was going to be a great, I mean, better than most opportunities for very efficient shadow work or personal growth, because I knew it would trigger me. I knew it would bring things up in me for me to work on. Um, yes, and uh, yeah, I was pleasantly surprised by by the number of men that I encountered. And a lot of this had, I mean, it's always relational, right? So a lot of this had to do with how I was showing up in the work, which was, other than using a pseudonym for most of that time, I was being very authentic. I was working with a group of women, and the organizer of the group, the woman who, scheduled the appointments and did marketing, stuff like that. She was very, strong about, don't tell them anything about yourself, right? Maybe come up with, and at first I've done theater, so I was very excited about this idea of, oh, I'll come up with a
Oh,
character and
backstory. I love that.
it'll be a whole, it'll be a acting experience. And Andrew, I did that for one day and it was just exhausting. It was exhausting, especially in such an intimate setting, where I'm topless for every appointment. I got to a point in the work where I was naked for most of my appointments because I actually discovered that I just really like being naked. um, and physical vulnerability in that way I found really encourages more emotional vulnerability, just organically. Often, not always, depending on the person. Um, Yeah, and after just that first day, other than using a pseudonym, for most of that time, I was radically authentic. I just didn't feel the need to hide, and it became quickly apparent that most of the time the men that came for these appointments were just as on edge, if not much more nervous, afraid,
Yeah.
insecure than I was. It became very obvious that I was the one in control, per se. Um, at least most of the time. I rarely met a client who was so genuinely at ease and authentic in their own self, that they could really, 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 really meet me where I was at. And because of my authenticity, I was able to meet many, 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 many of them where they were at, and had the just delightful and very honoring to me, experience of having hundreds of men just, I mean, reveal the deepest contents of their lives, things that oftentimes they had never told anyone, not felt safe to tell anyone. And there was great emotional depth, sometimes mental, philosophical depth in those sessions. Yeah, and what I came to see, and then I said, well, and to circle back quickly, you know, I bring up how I was in those sessions because I recognize that I accumulated a regular clientele that was of that caliber because I was being who I was, right? So in that I was attracting men clients who wanted authenticity, wanted intelligence, wanted that emotional awareness and that deeper presence in a facilitator. Even then, doing sex work, right? The same principles still play out, and over time, the clients who I saw once or twice who were looking for something more superficial didn't come see me again, and were happy to go see other workers who were offering something more superficial, right? So that works out very well for everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what I learned, what I came to realize over time was I mean, oftentimes just how lost and confused these men were, especially in their relationships with women, and how most of them just didn't have the tools, the resources to, you know, to be present with themselves and their own emotions. You know, so then how are they going to be present with a partner? And that was, you know, that awareness and just watching it for month after month, year after year over time was really what spurred me into integrating that work in with my coaching business, which I had already started prior to being in sex work, but with a much different focus. My background, I came out of behavioral therapy, so initially my coaching business was focused on children, and teaching like mindfulness skills to children. And over time, I continued to feel so called to integrate the work I was doing with men as a sex worker into my coaching business, because I continued to hear this echo of, I mean, I could teach you, right? I could teach you how to do those things that you don't know how to do. I could offer you those resources that you clearly don't have. And then instead of this just being a momentary safe haven for you to come in and unload and then go back out into, you know, typically the same old, same old, same old, maybe with a few little changes. Instead, you could come in here and you could actually get what you need to make big pivotal transformations in your life. And that's what's most fulfilling for me, selfishly as a facilitator, is seeing that, is watching a client realize that they don't need me. Like I don't want to hang on to my clients. I want them to come to understand themselves and the process, come to understand themselves, one, and come to understand the process of what it takes to know oneself even more and more and more and more, and so that they don't need me, and maybe that's just that they continue to work with me, but our relationship, you know, continues to change and morph over time, right? Because we're both continuing to grow and change. Maybe they find a different facilitator that matches more that new version of them. Maybe they go for a time without any kind of facilitator and lean into whatever new tool or resource they've discovered, community, etc. through becoming more of themselves through our work. And ultimately, what I want for my clients is for them to, for like them to fly, for them to be like
Yeah,
little birds
yeah,
that jump out of the tree.
yes.
um, yeah. And so that was a big motivator in me making that transition back into to not sex work, or just a very, well, yes, not sex work, but intimacy work as
Yeah.
opposed to sex work, was because I I did actually, Andrew, try for quite a long, a couple of years to make that kind of transformation happen as a sex worker. Um, my experience was unsuccessful. Maybe other people have had more success, but just having that sexual aspect in a relationship really does create a lot of attachment. That's very
Yeah.
difficult to transference, countertransference. That's
Mhm.
difficult to unentangle, right? Um,
Mm.
yeah, so I guess I chose the path of least resistance there. That, well, I'll just remove that confounding factor, and whoever would like to work with me in a different kind of container, I can help you just as much and maybe more.
It just feels like a very beautiful evolution, really. So you've sort of gone from this learning, listening, understanding, and then, yeah, transforming into something quite different. So, gosh, we've talked for a long time. You're very, very generous. I've got so much more I want to ask you, but I will limit myself to one more question, and then I'll send you an email saying when can we talk again.
Okay.
And the final one, and I don't know whether you have an answer for this or not, really, but do you have a feeling or a vision for what your future might hold?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. um, yeah, remember, Andrew, I'm still chasing that.
You are.
So
Yeah.
yeah, teasing. Yeah, always holding space for that next level of clarity. Yeah, I'm continuing to want to work with, well, and I call it work and play. There's definitely a big element of play in my sessions with clients, which is so important for that self-work. However we're doing it is to
Mm.
maintain like at least a little bit of a sense of lightheartedness, maybe humor, you know. Um, yeah, yeah, I'm really, I'm wanting to move towards working with even more so individuals who are really passionate about that self-actualization, that getting in touch with the authentic self, who have enough of a fire for that, to power through when things get challenging. And I have come a long way in that in my clientele. And that continues to be something that I want for. Um, yeah, so I'm like right now in the process of starting to get a little bit of clarity as to how I can maybe filter clients in that way. While also I do want to continue to offer resources very widely. Um,
Yeah.
so I'm working on a couple of books. I I've talked to a few people, other therapists, about maybe creating an app that uses AI um, to facilitate in a way that is more based on transpersonal psychology, Jungian
Mhm.
psychology, that's just more along the lines of what I do and what these other therapists do. Just maybe as a first step for some people who aren't necessarily ready to jump into the kitchen, right? They're like, I can't stand that heat yet, right? I don't even know how to recognize my emotions. I know one emotion, I know 3 emotion words. Everything else is just uncomfortable. Yeah, and then, okay, so the question comes up, okay, how can those people also be served? And I think there is potentially a lot of good that something like an AI-based app could offer, just to get them some fundamentals, so that then if we do end up working together, what they're coming in with, even maybe just from 2 months of working with such an app, we're actually able to make progress much more quickly because of those fundamentals. Yeah, and I'm working on a doctorate in holistic health. I'm just always continuing to look for additional tools to offer my clients. I look for tools that I'm like, I feel confident that everyone can benefit from this. Like I'm very, again, because it's a cornerstone for me to respect everyone's autonomy and sovereignty. I get very hands off when it comes to things like recommending food. And a lot of that has to do with, I've been through many, many, many different ways of eating, diets on my journey. I'm well aware that there have been many like healthy diets that my body just like hated, totally reacted to. And I was still, there was some level of inside out in those choices, but a lot of that was still an outside in choice. As I continued to get more in touch with my body and just being able to sense in the moment, what do you want to eat right now? So yeah, I get very hands off about things that can be very subjective, like certain diets, certain ways of eating. I mean, there have been times when what I needed to help my emotional regulation was not eating for a couple of days and just drinking water. But if I had told that to a doctor or a therapist, they, I would have gotten some finger wagging, right? So things like that, I'm pretty, I will help facilitate you to get in touch with yourself on that topic, right? And there are some tools still that I'm like, okay, I feel confident that this is something that I can, in good conscience, recommend across the board. Yeah, and so that's also something I have in mind, and the term that keeps coming in, and I don't know exactly how this will look, is like an online clinic. So as a part of continuing to serve a broader audience, I realize that that's it doesn't necessarily have to, and it will probably support that vision to be more remote, and to do more group work, including more speaking, and then more just group sessions. So just recently I have opened, well, early this year, and it's just now really taking shape. I've opened up like a group session that meets most weeks. That's open as of now to only the clients I'm working with one-on-one. And that just has continued to facilitate faster healing and growth for people who show up to the group. Yeah, that's, oh, and yeah, so that's professionally. And yeah, I am excited to be, not right now, but getting to the point in my life, within the next 5 years, I'd like to start having children. I'm very excited for that phase in my journey. Yeah. So also anticipating, realizing that will change a lot of things, and excited to see how it all integrates.
Gosh, you did say at the beginning, oh, I don't mind if we go for 2 hours. 2 hours, never. But it was you're so easy. So obviously, you know this. You're so easy to talk to, and bring things out of people. So thank you so much for your time, for your candor, openness, intelligence, kindness. It's really appreciated, and I have in my head now a whole new list of questions to ask you. So we need to talk again for sure. I would love that. But yeah, thank you so much. I will let you go back and have some of your day before you have to go to bed when it's too late.
Well, you're 7 hours ahead.
What are we now?
Is it 8?
It's 7:30. Yeah, 7:30.
Half past 7. Okay, so 6 hours ahead. Yeah, I'm at 1:30 p.m. So I have a little more time before you before going to bed.
I need to get some dinner.
Yes.
So
yes.
Thank you again, and just keep being the person you are. That's a wonderful part of humanity. So thank you.
You're so welcome. Yeah, and I would love to come on again, Andrew. I'm already looking forward to it.